Joining us for another episode of Never Again Live podcast with Meir Halevi Weinstein. We're going to get started immediately. We have a lot to talk about tonight, so sit back. And there is a live chat. If anybody wants to chime in, please go for it.
It's slow and stuff.
Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom Aleichem, Hebenu Shalom, Shalom.
That's me hiding out in the studio. I'm Dr. B down here. We have Meir, who's joining us from Israel this evening. We have a couple of special guests with us this evening as well. Akiva Ariel, who has a many faceted life in Israel, including Bayadino, returning to the Temple Mount. He's also very active with Brave Together. Brave Together is an organization which takes those who either were in the Holocaust, the heroes and heroines of the Holocaust, and draws inspiration from them. So check him out at bravetogether.com. And when he's not doing those things, he's a sales and marketing specialist for the publishing company. So if you're looking for a good halakha book, get in touch with them. Also joining us this evening, a little later in the show, will be Ryan Bellerose. Ryan Bellerose is up in Calgary. He's a passionate self-proclaimed Zionist. He's a metis of tribal from Alberta, and he recognizes and appreciates the common issues affecting Native Americans and Jews. He's involved with Canada United with Israel, as well as Calgary United with Israel organization, of which he's a founding member of. Also returning for a visit with us tonight, we always enjoy having him with us. For his wisdom, as well as his comic relief, we have Meir Jolovitz. Meir Jolovitz is a Middle East analyst. He's a lecturer, educator, and he's a columnist, not to be fused with communist, of the past national chairman of the Jewish Defense League, as well as the Zionist Organization of America. You can read his works in a variety of publications. As I'd mentioned, everybody's quite aware of everything going on today in Israel and the world regarding Zionism and Judaism and this surge of anti-Semitism. So we're going to emphasize in tonight's show terrorism and Ramadan and how closely linked they are, and the direct relationship that they have to our sacred Temple Mount.
The real core of the conflict is the unfortunate Arab refusal to accept the state of Israel. And I think, as was mentioned earlier, for 20 years the Arabs have both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip And if self-determination were, as they now say, the core of the conflict, they could have easily established a Palestinian state then, but they didn't.
The world is a dangerous place not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing. So don't be an onlooker. Be involved. Join israelnow.ca. Watch our shows. All of our broadcasts are available on israelnow.ca. And here's Meir to bring us the Parsha of the week.
Hi, good
Take it
evening,
away.
everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm in Israel right now. I'm in Ma'ale Adumim, which is adjacent to Jerusalem. It's beautiful here. I encourage everyone to come here. That's the answer to the terrorism, number one. And there's a lot more to be done also about terrorism. We're going to be discussing that tonight. This week's Parsha is Parshas Tazria. And in this Parsha, we talk about being pure, being impure, what happens if you come in contact with a dead body that makes you impure, and therefore there's a process you have to go through to rectify that and become clean again, pure again. There's also a sort of like a disease, saras, and that's comparable in a certain way to leprosy. And if somebody is stricken by this, gets this disease, there is a process that they have to go through in order to purify themselves. When I looked at that, and I read also about if a Jew comes in contact with a dead body and touches it, that makes you impure, and you got to go through a process. And the whole discussion about holiness and the opposite of holiness. Just over a week ago, not even 2 weeks, but a week and a half, Rabbi Kamnevsky died. He passed away in Bnei Brak. He was regarded as one of the greatest rabbis of our generation. In fact, about 1 million Jews attended his funeral. Think about that. About 1 million Jews attended his funeral. There was a session in Knesset devoted to speak about him. Rabbis throughout the world were talking about him, how he affected their lives, and what a phenomenal holy man he was. And just picture that in your mind right now. 1 million Jews gathering in Bnei Brak to attend his funeral. Such an experience and such a loss for the Jewish people, such a holy giant. And yet, when we talk about holiness, the exact opposite. BDS Hamas terrorists entered Bnei Brak and murdered Jews. They murdered Jews in cold blood. And where'd they come from? There are work permits that the government of Israel gives to Arabs from the territories and from Gaza. They come in with work permits. They go back to their cities that they came from, and there's mass gatherings in their cities celebrating the murder of Jews in Bnei Brak, where just 10 days ago, Jews were involved in such introspection and talking about a Jewish sage that represented the holiness of Judaism. Ramadan's coming up, and already Islamic leaders in Israel are talking about, they're preaching incitement against Jews. We're going to be talking tonight about the Temple Mount, about terrorism, and about Ramadan. And I want people to be involved. We have an active chat. If you have any questions, comments, feel free. We'll do our best to address it. We have with us some guests tonight. Akiva Ariel is with us. He's the public relations director for Be'adenu, an organization that educates Jews and brings Jews up to the Temple Mount. So it's great to have him on the show with us. He's going to explain what the objectives of the organization is and what the challenges are as well. We have Meir Jolowitz with us. We've had him before many times on the show, and we're going to get into the issues. Let me say right now one clear statement I'd like to make. That the composition of the government of Israel, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Foreign Minister Yair Lapid would rather sit in a coalition with members of the Islamist Party and anti-Zionist people in Israel than with Benjamin Netanyahu. That makes absolutely no sense. This is a state of emergency right now. There are terrorists running rampant throughout Israel, and there is the will of the Jewish people of Israel to take away their motivation. But this government that there is the wrong coalition. It makes absolutely no sense. We'll be discussing that tonight. Akiva Ariel, how are you tonight?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Tell me, Akiva, what? First of all, how long have you been involved with the Be'adenu organization? And tell us about the organization, what you've been doing with the Temple Mount, what activities there are.
So I'm involved. Actually, I started ascending the Temple Mount from very young age, before my bar mitzvah. In the past 5 years, 4 or 5 years, I'm part of I joined the student movement called the Students for the Temple Mount, that was founded by Tom Nisani, who's today the CEO of Be'adenu. And about a year ago, I started being involved with Be'adenu as being leading the public relation team. Our organization, Be'adenu, is one of the biggest organizations today talking about the Temple Mount, bringing the Temple Mount into Israeli society. We have a few goals. Our main goal is to bring Israeli sovereignty to the Temple Mount, because today it's not clear. There's so many other countries, if it's the Jordan, Turkey, the Palestinians, they're all involved. They do whatever they want. The Waqf is very strong there, the Islamic Waqf, and the police are not really the main control over there. So our goal is to bring Israeli sovereignty, that we'll be able to one day wave an Israeli flag in the Temple Mount without being arrested, and pray on the Temple Mount, and really bringing and other than that, connecting Israelis back to the Temple Mount. Today, most Israeli society doesn't know the Temple Mount. never visited the Temple Mount, and forgot that the Temple Mount is the holiest site for Jews in the world. So we go to schools, we talk to them, we go up with them to the Temple Mount. We fight for Jewish. Fight at court with our lawyers at the Temple Mount to make the Temple Mount a safer place for Jews and a place where Jews can have every freedom that they want and need and deserve at the holy site. And we also work at the Knesset. We talk to all members and try to change stuff through the law. And that's the main stuff we do.
Excellent. Okay, so tomorrow, Itamar Ben Gavur, he's planning to visit. The police gave him permission. He's planning to visit the Temple Mount, and already you have Hamas and every BDS anti-Israel organization, every single anti-Semite is threatening violence against Itamar Ben Gavur. There's, when Jews are walking on the Temple Mount, taking in the holiness of the site, the BDS and Hamas and all the anti-Semites, they say that we are storming the Temple Mount. It's ridiculous. It's unbelievable. Let's bring on Meir Jolowitz to come into this. Meir, there's the terrorism going on, Temple Mount, Ramadan. Fill in the blanks. How do you see it? You've been very involved.
A couple of things. As I often do when I join you, I will throw a couple of different matters out there and I'll sort of connect the dots, and I'll try to do that quickly. I've always said that language matters. And the misappropriation of language leads to, and it defines the debate, defines the narrative. And the narrative always directs the debate. And we always lose on that count. I've always said that language matters. And given the fact that you have the other guest from Halevi, talking about the Temple Mount, let me give that as a perfect example. It was 4 years ago that the United States made everybody who was a supporter of Israel quite happy, because they were going to recognize something which King David recognized 3,020 years before, which was that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. All good and well.
Yep.
Here's what the problem was. 4 years ago, when the embassy of the United States was moved, and there were speeches that were given, and everyone in the Jewish world who loved Israel celebrated, it was an obvious thing that was a stick in our eye, and we seemed to purposefully ignore it. In speeches given by President Trump, and he did it by video, by Jared Kushner, Mike Pompeo also, these are all friends of Israel. And they spoke about the glory of having moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And yet when they referred to the Temple Mount, mind you, their speeches were given in English. And when they gave the speech, they all said in reference, and the sentence was verbatim, word for word, the same. And the sentence was celebrating this, the Jewish, and they said the Temple Mount, or as it is also known as Haram el-Sharif. So while they are in fact extolling the virtues of the Jewish claim to the Temple Mount, they dare to profane this by suggesting the Temple Mount, otherwise known as Haram el-Sharif.
Right.
Which by language already creates a problem. It gives title. It's just that the Temple Mount is the Temple Mount, and I don't think they use the word Har-Habayit. The Temple Mount for the Jewish people, also known as Haram el-Sharif for the Arabs. And all of a sudden, we see the problem that our side. Naftali Bennett was criticized just 2 days ago when meeting with American officials, referred to Judea and Samaria as the West Bank. And what we've done is we've played language. We've lost the game of language. I watch all the time on television, and they'll be talking about what should be the Arab war against Israel or the Muslim war against Jews. They refer to it as the Israel-Palestine conflict. Not even the Israeli-Palestinian, the Israel-Palestine conflict. And when you put it all together, it doesn't bode well. We have surrendered the ideological claim to because we use the language of the enemy. A sentence or two about Ramadan. Ramadan begins April 1st this year. It runs until May 1st. It's 30 days. People know Ramadan as a Muslim holiday. There's one thing that the statistics show us is that the incidents of Arab terrorism, and we saw that they've happened and they've predated Ramadan, they escalate during Ramadan. It's part of the nature of the holiday. I have in the past told people they should go online on the internet to the religionofpeace.com.
Right.
Religionofpeace.com. Religionofpeace.com is a site which was established immediately after 9/11, talking in 2001, and it has cataloged every single act of Muslim terrorism throughout the world since that time. It gives you the time, the place, the deaths, the casualties, and a sentence or two behind it. Remarkably, I just did a radio show a few days ago. The night before the radio show, I went because there's an update. It's an actual body count of how many people have been murdered in the name of Islam. Islamic terrorism, including killing other Muslims as well, but killing non-Muslims and such. When I checked the night before the broadcast, that figure was 41,111. A few hours later, when I went to the studio to do the radio program, that number had already escalated to 4,120. When I came home a few hours later, that number had escalated again. The religionofpeace.com is an indication of what the real world needs to understand about Islam. One last sentence about this. If one goes back, and it's a comprehensive repository of information showing you the violent nature of Islam. But when one goes back and actually looks at the dates, and you look at the escalation of the acts of terrorism, something will just pop out at you, which is every year during the time of Ramadan, those numbers escalate considerably. This is the way they celebrate their holidays, by victimizing us. Right. And if we don't have the wherewithal to even call Har HaBayit or the Temple Mount by its real name, and we allow our supporters and our friends to refer to it as Haram el Sharif,
right,
said we will lose this game.
Absolutely. Akiva, Meir said quite a bit right there. You're right in the middle of it, involved with the Temple Mount. First of all, what kind of threats are you seeing? And just give us some background. What's going on the ground there?
So I'll start first with the threats on the Temple Mount around all year. Today on the Temple Mount, there's like almost a dozen gates.
Right.
Jews can enter from one gate by the western wall, the Rubim gate, which we refer to as the Hallel gate, in name of Hallel Ariel. I'm not related to her, but she from Kiryat Arba. Her parents were very activist in the going up the Temple Mount, and after she was murdered, also at the time of Ramadan a few years ago, all the activists decided to call that gate the Halevi gate, but that's the only gate Jews can enter, and that gate is very protected. There's metal detectors. The police make sure you can't bring in holy books, anything that's holy for Jews cannot go through there. No flags, no signs. That's that gate. Also, tourists go through that gate, and also not allowed to bring in anything of that kind. And the other gates, so many gates that only Muslims can enter. There's no metal detectors. They can just walk in there with guns, with knives, and they can suspect them, but that's the only thing they can do. And we already know that guns and knives were able to go into the Temple Mount and then go out of the Temple Mount and kill on the way out Jews, like Eddie K that was murdered a few months ago, and like different and other the two policemen that were murdered in 2017 on the Temple Mount by Israeli Arabs from Al-Fahim. All of that with different weapons that can go in and go out with no one can check it. We remember already that once the government tried to put metal detectors, and they had to take it off because the Muslims there's so many riots and didn't let them. So that's one threat. That's the main threat today on the Temple Mount. They can walk wherever they want. The other threat is the Waqf itself. Just this week was on the news in Israel that the head of the Waqf, their CEO, that he's part of the Waqf, is apparently the head of a Hamas organization on the Temple Mount for around 30 years. And the past month, someone else from the organization was investigated by the police, but the head of the organization, nothing happened to him because he's part of the Waqf. So you see how the Hamas is involved in the Temple Mount, involved with the Waqf, involved with Al-Aqsa, with the mosque over there, and that's who's strong over there. Hamas, ISIS, and different terrorist organizations. And what happens on Ramadan is that Israel every year gives them presents because it's their holiday. Because it's their holiday, they say, "Oh, now we will let you bring Muslims from all over Judea and Samaria, from Gaza. Let all of them come up." They bring them up, young Muslims that are all very anti-Semitic, and they're very they're against us, and they do riots. And in the meantime, they cut the hours that Jews can enter. And today, Jews can enter the Temple Mount for 5 hours a day, 4 hours in the morning, and another hour at noon. From 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock a.m. and from 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. From Sunday, and it was declared today by the head of the police in Jerusalem, Jews will not will only be allowed to enter for the whole month of Ramadan from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock a.m. The hour at noon will be cut off, will not be allowed to enter. So what happens is Jews pull out, there's no Jews, and the Muslims from Ramallah, from Shechem, from Jenin all enter. So they start doing riots and wanting to kill Jews, and they throw stones, and there's nothing we can do about it. and that pulls. Then they leave the Temple Mount filled with their hatred to Jews, and they attack Jews because, as we already mentioned, there's no problem to bring weapons in and to leave the Temple Mount with those weapons and then attack Jews all over Israel and Jerusalem on the way back to where they're going, if it's in Judea and Samaria, and if it's Arabs that are going back to Fahim or down south to Rahat and to the Negev and all of the Negev. So that's the main threat on the Temple Mount. They do whatever they want, and we can't bring up a holy book. We can't take our tefillin up the Temple Mount. We're the ones that are considered the dangerous.
So just to be clear, Arabs from areas throughout the land of Israel, Gaza, Judea, Samaria, Jenin, all kinds of areas where just the other day they are celebrating Jews murdered. These people are being permitted to go to the Temple Mount and incite even more under the guise of religious freedom, Ramadan.
Right.
Who in the
Exactly
government?
as you said.
Who in the government says no? Anyone?
That's the thing, that year after year, that's what they understand. If we'll give them more freedom, if we give the Muslims more freedom, they're gonna hate us less and not try to kill us.
Yeah,
that's what
sure.
they think. That's a consumption.
It doesn't seem to be working. We have Ryan Belarus with us as well. Is he logged in?
Yep.
Is Ryan here? Ryan, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, Meir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got some static in the background, but
yeah,
maybe,
I don't
maybe I could be muted there a little bit while you're going to be giving your perspective on this.
Yeah. So whoever that is, maybe just if they just mute their mic, because it sounds like there's people talking in the background.
Yeah,
I don't think it's coming from my end.
I think I've tried to mute everybody's mic. So I think whoever's talking, everybody else just mute theirs from your end. I feel like from my end it's not helping.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. So yeah, I was listening to Akiva. You know, this is one of the most basic things. It's literally, I think, I don't know what that is in the background, but anyway, it's one of the most basic problems. I mean, I talked about it a lot when I was in Israel, when I went up on the Temple Mount, because I went up with some Jewish friends, and the nonsense that we went through just to get up on the Temple Mount was just ridiculous. Like, they basically told us, you know, you can't hang your head because you might be secretly praying. You know, they told us we weren't allowed to carry any papers because those papers might have prayers on them. I mean, and these are things like they were saying these things to us as if everyone in our group was Jewish. And finally, I got kind of a little bit pissed off, and I said, listen, like, I just watched that group ahead of us, you know, go in, and you guys didn't give them any of these rules. Like, what's going on here? And the guy looked at me and he kind of smirked and he said, well, they're Muslims. And I was just kind of like, so let me get this straight. Like, there's all these really particular rules about what Jews can or cannot do, but Muslims don't have to follow those same rules. And then I noticed in that same video I made, I took videos of those green doors, because there's all those different green doors and gates that you can get up on the Temple Mount, but you can't go through them unless you're a Muslim. And they will actually stop you at the door and ask you if you're a Muslim. And I was there with an Israeli Arab named Yahya Mohammed. And Yahya was actually, like, he's Muslim. So they told him, you can go, but your friend can't. And he's like, well, if my friend can't go, I'm not going to go, right? So, and like, we're talking about all this stuff as if it's just matter of course, because this is factual. Like, any Jew that's tried to go up on the Temple Mount knows this is exactly the experience they're going to have. They go up there, they get yelled at. The next day, there's a big fucking thing on, big friggin' thing on the news media about how the Jews were storming the Temple Mount because a few Jews went up there quietly to walk around and pray. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that leads to these riots. Because if you look, dating all the way back to the idiot there, what's his name, the Mufti, when he used to talk about how the Jews were trying to wreck the Temple Mount, that was always one of the things that they used to get the Arabs riled up, to get them to riot, is how somehow the Jews are going to do something bad to the Temple Mount. a couple years ago, right before another spate of terrorism, they were talking about how you guys were digging under the Temple Mount to steal secret Muslim archives and all this crap. There's no Muslim artifacts and archives under there. We all know this stuff, but we've allowed this. And, Akiva brought up another good point. They tried to put up cameras and metal detectors, which anyone with a shred of common sense and common decency would realize is probably the least invasive thing you could do in order to perpetuate some security there. And yet the Muslims, what do? They have their little day of rage that they have every Friday, it seems like. They spaz out, they throw a big fit, and then even in the international community is like, oh, you guys should take those cameras down. It's like, wait a minute, like those cameras and metal detectors are literally there to prevent Jews from being murdered. Like, they're not invasive. I like it's one of the most ridiculous things. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit pissed off, but I've been watching the last couple days on the news, and it's like nonstop. Like, Jews are being murdered. They're absolutely being murdered. And I see silence. All the social justice warriors that are always ready to jump on Israel every time something happens in the Middle East. I mean, a Palestinian stubs his toe and everybody's talking about war crimes. Now there's silence. Not a single word. And it's weird because you know what? B'nai Brak, that's a neighborhood filled with anti-Zionist Jews. That's a neighborhood where there are a lot of Jews who do not believe in the state of Israel. They're not there trying to kill Zionists. They're there to kill Jews. Like, and people need to understand this. This is not about Jewish self-determination. This is not about anything about Jews other than existing. And I'm
Right.
really sorry that, I'm being pretty verbose about this, but it is something that's always bothered me. Sorry.
No, 100%. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. No, 100%. So, look, the craziness of it is that, like Akiva said, the people who are coming to the Temple Mount for Ramadan to incite, they're coming from areas where just yesterday we see them celebrating, handing out sweets, loving it that Jews were murdered in B'nai Brak and other places in Israel. There was today there was an attempted. There was actually a stabbing in Jerusalem by the market, the outdoor market, the Shuk, and there was an attempted terrorist attack in Netanya today as well. So they really want, and they're coming from these areas, and it's a party atmosphere in Gaza, Jenin, and throughout Judea and Samaria. I mean, it's unbelievable. To allow them to come in, I mean, it's got to be closed. You can't let them in.
So, Meir, do you follow Mark Provisor on Facebook at all?
A little bit.
Yeah. So Mark posted a video, and I know Josh Haston's posted these videos as well, of Arabs that climb through the fence, and there's taxis waiting on the road for them to take them into Israel to go to work. And, I have to say this, and I know people are going to get upset at me, but I don't really give a shit. I'm at the point now where I'll just say what I think.
Go ahead.
The problem is that there are Arabs who genuinely want peace. There are Arabs who fight in the IDF. One of the policemen who was murdered was an Arab Israeli, right?
That's right.
There are Arabs who want desperately to participate in the wonderful project that is Israel. The problem is that they're not the majority. And the problem is that the people who genuinely hate Jews will murder Jews. This is not about whether or not people will say mean things to you. This isn't about BDS. This isn't about hurting feelings. This is about murder. And we can't allow the idea that those people's feelings are more important than Jewish people's rights to safety and security on their own ancestral land. And we really have to start being very blunt about that, because this
Ryan,
is about Jewish life.
Ryan, I had a discussion with Meir Jolowitz just before the show, and Meir could chime in on that we were talking about just that point, that yes, I think there were 2 police officers that were Arabs that were murdered in the terrorist attacks. And it's a tragedy, and everyone who steps forward to help Israel, the Jewish people, we honor and we respect. And Yad Vashem, in fact, has a section for the righteous of the world who helped Jews during the Holocaust. But the percentage of people that help Jews or help Israel, it's very small. When we see mass crowds in these Arab majority cities or Arab only cities that are celebrating and giving out pastries, and there's such glee. And we see a BDS network that's supported by major Islamic organizations throughout the world, calling Jews in Bnei Brak illegal settlers. You're absolutely right that we have to be very clear about it and call a spade a spade. And thank you, but we want to exist, and we have to take measures to exist. Maybe Meir could chime in.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say, but let me give a little perspective to the comment that was made, which misleads.
Yep.
The number of Arabs. We're not talking about Druze now. We're talking about the number of Arabs who actually serve with the IDF or do things on behalf of Israel is a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority. There are 800 Arabs in the IDF out of an active force of 184,000. Let's not spend idle time talking about, let's not forget, because the comment that was made is, well, they're not a majority. No. 800 out of 184,000 isn't a majority. So let's not even waste time with that.
That's literally what I said. I said they're not a majority. My point is that there are actually people like that exist. And what my worry is that when we get too carried away, and I'll be blunt, I agree with you.
Wait. Allow me.
About Jewish lives, but there are actually people out there that are fighting on your side. You don't want to
allow me. Excuse me. Let me give you. You're saying that, well, they're not the majority. It's like my saying, well, I'm not exactly a billionaire. And it's true. I'm not really exactly a billionaire. It's nonsense. They are the enemy.
Bullshit.
Look.
Bullshit.
Excuse me.
Bullshit.
Why don't you wait until I speak and then you throw your bullshit around?
If you stop bullshitting, then I'll wait till you're done speaking.
There are 800 Arabs who serve in one capacity or another in the Israeli.
And they are not the enemy. You just said they're the enemy. They are not the enemy.
Oh boy,
hey guys! Time out for both of you if you don't.
No.
Let him make his point.
I can mute you guys. When one of you is talking, the other has to be quiet.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I'll start muting you guys.
Thank you. The notion I'm saying it's misleading to suggest we're on the air for 60 minutes. For you to spend 5 minutes talking about the Arabs who were there defending Israel and everything is a terrible and tragic, nonsensical waste of time.
Except two of them just fucking died doing it.
No. One was a Druze, the other was an Arab, but that isn't the point. The point that I'm making is that there's a misconception that you pervade. Now, a generation ago, Rabbi Kahana made the comment, and it was true then, and it's certainly true today. The problem in Israel isn't the Arab, it's the Jew. It's the Jew that allows the Arab to do what the Arab does. Someone mentioned guns. You can take guns up, you can't take guns up, that the Arabs take guns up. The Israeli Security Service, and now it's 3 days ago, they believe, and they upped the figure, that there are 400,000 illegal guns in the hands of Arabs. 400,000. 36 hours later, they upped that figure to close to 500,000. Today, Naftali Bennett comes out and says that all those Jews who have a licensed handgun should begin to carry a licensed handgun. People don't realize how difficult, first of all, to carry a handgun, to get a license in Israel. When tourists come back and they go, boy, I took all these pictures of me with Israelis with guns. Yes, you took a picture of an Israeli walking in Ben Yehuda Mall who happens to be a soldier and he had a gun. Israeli citizens, tragically, are not well armed. And the process of getting a license in Israel is terrible. It's an abomination. Jews.
I agree.
Now, for every Arab that you have that stands to defend the Jewish right to be there, are tens and tens of thousands who celebrate in Arab towns in Israel. Let me say that just in case there was that static you were concerned about, Arabs in Israel, who dance in the streets. When rockets fell for 11 days in May, rockets which were launched from Gaza.
You're
and
not telling us
landed in
anything
Israel.
we haven't heard before. We know. I know this.
Arabs in Israel celebrated. 4,369 rockets were launched. Arabs in Israel. Pogroms were held in Arab towns in Israel. Not in Tehran, not in
I'm aware, Meir.
Baghdad.
What was your point? You're just repeating the same stuff.
No, I'm not. The point I'm making is for you to suggest, well, don't forget the Arabs are there with us.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. You're
Excuse me.
literally trying to find something to argue with me about that I didn't even say.
No. I wasn't going to talk about the Arabs in Israel. I just said the opposite. I said that the problem is it's not the Arabs, it's the way that the Jews allow the Arabs to do what they do. That's what the problem is. There's a problem.
I don't disagree.
In Israel, the media is with the Arabs. In the Knesset, you have Arab parties which basically don't recognize Israel's right to exist.
I'm aware. I've also talked about the Supreme Court taking their side all the time. I know.
No, I'm not. Wait, I'm not trying to talk about what you don't talk about. I'm trying to talk about what I want to talk about, okay? In Israel, in the Knesset, you have members of the Knesset who sit at times as deputy speaker of the Knesset who don't recognize Israel's right to exist. They are part of the coalition government. And yet, what happened 3 days ago? Secretary of State Blinken visits Israel, and you have three of the top people in Israel today. We know where they are. Naftali Bennett, Yair Lapid, the alternate prime minister and the foreign minister, and its defense minister, Benny Gantz, all at one time or another making public pronouncements. This is in the last 72 hours, saying that Israel agrees with Blinken that Israel needs to do more to satisfy the not even talking about the Israeli Arabs, to satisfy the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinians, that more funds need to be directed, more social services need to be directed. This insanity of our aiding our murderer needs to stop. And the insanity isn't on the part of the Arab. It's on us. Now, 100%. J Street, we've identified J Street, for example. We've identified J Street as a self-hating Jewish organization that has a tagline which is fraudulent, which says it is pro-peace, pro-Israel, pro-peace. It is neither pro-Israel nor is it pro-peace. If you go to the Instagram today, to J Street's Instagram on J Street has a picture of one fallen person, and they bemoan the fact, and who was the person that J Street mentioned? The only one that they mentioned who was murdered yesterday, it was the Arab.
Yeah,
and they
said, that's typical J Street.
And they, let me make my point. J Street didn't mention the Jews that died. J Street mentioned the Arab. They showed his picture.
Because they want that narrative.
And thank you very much. The point that I made earlier was that we're losing the narrative. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're establishing the narrative. Look, an Arab died defending Jews without a mention of the Jews that died. Here's my bottom line. The bottom line is all the things that are being said here is good and well. They're the micro. The macro is this. The Arabs don't recognize Israel's right to exist, and it has nothing to do with territory. And everybody seems to be misguided purposely, or perhaps not purposely, into believing that lines can be drawn someplace on a map that will somehow cure this problem. This is one of those problems in the world that there is no solution. There are two mutually exclusive ideologies founded on two mutually exclusive religions that if the one is to prevail, the other is to fail. And no one is willing to say that this war is a religious war. And if in fact, and let me make this point, it's very important, if there is in fact an Arab who stands up to defend Israel's right, then he is a bad Muslim. He is a bad Muslim. He's a good man. He's a good man, but he's a bad Muslim. Because Islam tells us what the prescription is. And it's the elimination of the infidel, the Jew, specifically. That's what the problem is. Kahana
So
was
Mayor,
right.
so Mayor, if, for instance, this coalition government that there is, if, for instance, Mansour Abbas stood up on a podium in the square, the main square of an Arab town, Fahim, let's say, and he had thousands of Arabs around him, and he's saying, we all have to condemn terrorism. We all support Israel. But that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen.
Well, actually, hold on,
Put out a
Mayor.
statement. That doesn't
Hold
happen
on.
at all.
No, but I'll tell you what did happen.
Yeah.
See, the person who is the smart person in the Knesset isn't the Jew, it's the Arab. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's playing the dumb Jews. Okay, this notion, this Yiddish cup, Mansour Abbas was not alone in being the Arab who condemned this act. Yesterday on Israeli radio yesterday, an Israeli Arab was asked, so how do you feel about the fact that Mansour Abbas, who represents you, actually condemned this as an act of terrorism? And the Arab, an Israeli Arab, scoffed, and rightly so, scoffed and said, almost like humored by it, and said, you actually believe that he condemns it? And he was indicating, are you that stupid as to not realizing that those tears are crocodile tears? And he is saying what he needs to say in order to continue, and I'm quoting him, to stay in power. The comment that he made was that Mansour Abbas said what he said in order to stay in power.
Right.
And the reality is, for those who follow the Knesset, he is the power in the Knesset, because if he pulls out, Naftali Bennett is unemployed. And that's exactly the situation. What we need to do is look at the macro. We need to look at the macro. There's no question. Har HaBayit is the most important. It's the most important thing in the Jewish world. And yet, and we've all described it, when Jews themselves can't take a Siddur up and pray in the Temple Mount, the problem is much greater than the Temple Mount. We're all loyal to Klal Yisrael. We're all loyal to Am Yisrael. But Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, has betrayed the people of Israel and the land of Israel. I repeat, the government
this program to bring a special announcement from Akiva, who would like to say something, but he's way too polite to cut people off and start yelling.
Wait.
Politely ask if he can make a comment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Akiva make a comment, and then everyone's going to take a time out, and we're going to show a little video. So take a breath. Akiva, take it away.
I just wanted to add that last year was the I think it's sad, but it's the best example for what happens when we really go up at the Temple Mount. At the end of Ramadan, which was the time of the Jerusalem Day, the whole Temple Mount was closed completely for Jews, and even though no Jew entered the Temple Mount, that day was the beginning day of the operation called Shomer HaChomot, which the Muslims call the sword of Jerusalem. And it was the first time that not only there was an operation in Gaza, but also Arabs in Lod, and in Akko, and in Haifa, and all of the Negev, and Jerusalem. They were attacking Jews like crazy, burning down houses, and you can see that there's a major, as everybody talked here and said, a major really hatred inside the Arabs, also in Israel, and it's all surrounded around the story of the Temple Mount, and that's the story. When we're weak on the Temple Mount, we're strong. The Arabs get stronger.
100%. Look, I think it's important to understand what I was saying. I'm not saying that all of a sudden all these Arabs are going to run to your defense. It's, if anything, it's the opposite. You need to place a premium on Jewish security. But there are, in fact, Arabs that are on your side. And I think that one of the ways we can reach them is by not trying to alienate them. Look,
We're alienating them.
Wow,
We're
wow.
I
alienating
agree
them.
with you, Ryan.
Mayor, I don't know if you
We're
know this, Mayor,
Comment.
but
You guys are all going to get
literally,
muted.
yeah.
But
We-
wait. Let me speak for a second.
We have a video on the
we
show.
are alienating them. Oh my
goodness.
God.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
It's okay.
First thing I
One
think
of these
we need
days
to
you'll
do is
wake
we
up
need
and
to
realize that you're
renovate-
kind of an idiot.
We need to renovate the Temple Mount, and I have an idea. So, what do you think of this concept for renovating the Temple Mount?
Unbelievable. I'm
Okay,
I'm
I did
back.
a little renovation. I think that would make it much more congenial to all people of all faiths to come back to the Temple Mount if we just did a
Yeah.
little bit of renovation. Okay, everybody agree with that concept? Now,
Big
with
leap.
that in mind, you'll recall recently Blinken was making some comments, and I think that this is important. This is about 3 or 4 minutes, so you'll take a breath and get your comments ready. So after this little video, which I think answers a lot of the points that we're talking about right now.
These regional peace agreements are not a substitute for progress between
Progress. Okay, he's talking about progress, and he's the one who gets up there and he makes the most naive comment I can imagine.
Palestinians and Israelis and create the conditions for a negotiated two-state solution.
He doesn't realize that they don't want a two-state solution; they want a one-state solution. So I'm going to entertain with a little bit of commentary.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Does that sound like they want a two-state solution to you? I think they want a one-state solution, and we're not in it. Now, I don't disagree with Ryan that there may be some indeed who want a two-state solution. The problem is, as soon as they say that, then they get killed by the overwhelming majority of Palestinians who really don't. For example,
Yeah.
he seems nice.
الاتصالات الساخنة منذ أمس وحتى الآن تجري مع الأشقاء في مصر وكذلك إخوتنا في قطر ومع الأمم المتحدة ونحن قلنا
What he's saying is if we just pull out of Jerusalem, there'll
بأن
be
الذي
peace.
أشعل
We know
النار
that's not true, but that's what he's saying in
تحديدا في
Arabic.
القدس والأقصى وامتد لهيبها إلى غزة هو
That's our
الاحتلال
fault because we're trampling on
الإسرائيلي
Palestinian land.
وبالتالي هو المسؤول عن كل التداعيات. إذا بدهم يصعدوا المقاومة جاهزة، بدهم يوقفوا المقاومة جاهزة، بدهم يرفعوا يدهم عن القدس المقاومة جاهزة. هذه رسالة أوصلناها لجميع الأطراف ولكل من يعنيه الأمر.
So remember the advice of Anthony Blinken.
And create the conditions for a negotiated two-state solution.
Really?
Yeah. All these guys.
Conflict is the unfortunate Arab refusal to accept the state of Israel. Well, for 20 years, we didn't hear anything about self-determination. And in fact, what we did hear, those of us living in the country, was about driving the Jews into the sea.
Now, this is very interesting. The question is, which was raised, is should Palestinians regain all the land of historic Palestine from the river to the sea? This is a survey done from January to February 2020. We're sponsored by the Washington Institute, and in conjunction with the Palestine Center for Public Opinion, they did a survey, and the survey asked this question specifically: should Palestinians regain all the land of historic Palestine? And although I don't disagree with Ryan that there may be 10 or 20 who think this is the case, but I think the overwhelming majority probably don't feel this way. And here's the results of the survey. again, by the Washington Institute and by the Policy Center for the Palestinians. So the question was asked to two separate groups of people. They asked the Gazans and the West Bankians if they think that there should be, if the land should be all Palestinian, void of Jews. These are the results, and I'll send you the study. It's not very surprising. So in Gaza, 56% of those surveyed feel that all of Palestine should be Muslim and the Jews don't belong there. Okay, so you think Gaza is the more aggressive, the more terroristic group of people? No Jews there. We pulled them all out. Here's the results of those surveyed in the West Bank. More Palestinians in the West Bank want the entire landmass to be Palestinian than those surveyed in Gaza. So that was kind of surprising to me. So in conclusion, personally, I agree. I prefer a proud and powerful Jewish state that is hated by the entire world than Auschwitz that is loved by one and all. And on that note, I'm going to first bring back Meir Weinstein, and then
these regional peace agreements are not a substitute for progress between Palestinians and Israelis.
Meir, take it away.
Yeah, when we started the show and I spoke about the Parsha, that in the Parsha we're talking about holiness and the exact opposite of holiness. And just about a week and a half ago, a rabbi who was revered by so many Jews in the world lived in Bnei Brak, and he died about a week and a half ago. And in Bnei Brak, and his funeral took place there with approximately 1 million Jews attending. And then all of a sudden, last night, there's a terrorist attack in Bnei Brak, and they're murdering Jews, and they're celebrating the murder in Arab towns throughout Judea and Samaria and Gaza. In fact, in some Israeli Arab towns, they're celebrating. In Fahim, they were celebrating, other places as well. And Israel's allowing these people to come into work into Israel. Where is the deterrence? What kind of government do we have? There was a professor that won the Israel Award, and he's a BDS professor, and the Supreme Court of Israel overruled the educational minister in Israel to give him the award. He supports the BDS, and the BDS is clear that Jews have no right to Israel. And they justify, the BDS right now is justifying the murders that happen in Bnei Brak. That's the meme right there. Pro BDS.
It's too small to read, but basically, first he was denied getting the award because he's a blatant, outspoken BDS supporter. Israel's Supreme Court ruled against the Minister of Education and decided that Mr. Goldreich, who is an anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic Jew, the court outruled the Minister of Education, and according to Schwarzer, this is a dark day for Zionism and for the judicial system. I can't disagree with what the people were saying.
Well, we obviously need in Israel a new government, because this government isn't providing proper deterrence, and they're providing almost like justification with the composition of what the government is. It makes no sense. And the mood on the street with Jews are they want a proper government that's going to provide proper deterrence. That's the mood on the street with the majority of Jews. They felt cheated in the election.
I mean, you even have the American ambassador that's saying we shouldn't say Judea and Samaria. Right. I mean, that's a heck of a difference from the last guy we had who was actually pro-Israel. Now we got a guy that hates Israel, and he's the ambassador from the U.S.
Yeah.
So
it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Look, I think that maybe I'm being misunderstood here. I'm not like one of those hippy dippy. We need to love everybody. I'm one of those people that just genuinely thinks that, look, it's all fine and good to say you'd rather be hated by everyone, but the problem is that we live in a world now with nuclear bombs, right? So it's good to be proud and to stand up and to tell people off when you have to, but we have to be a little bit strategic about it. I mean, right now, I believe this is probably the most dangerous time in Israel's history, and I'm including 1945, because if the Iranians get a nuke, I don't think there's any doubt where they would use it. And I think anybody that does doubt where they would use it is an idiot. Because, I mean, and America, they're just sitting on their hands now. America, they've kind of washed their hands of the whole thing. They're literally helping them actively to get nukes. And I mean, like,
Well,
so
Israel, I know. There's the threat of Iran, their nuclear bombs, but Israel is a leader of incredible technologies and military technologies, and there needs to be a will from the leadership to take care of Iran once and for all. That's it. If there was a state of Israel, Nazi Germany was around.
صهیونیستی
Purpose would be to
نفس‌های آخر
annihilate
می‌کشد.
that threat.
آمریکا از اریکه قدرتی بر زمین افتاده و لگدمال شد و شاخش رو این ملت ایران شکست. رژیم صهیونیستی در مقابل ملت ایران عددی نیست. یک گستاخی کرد، یک فضولی کرد، پاسخ کوبنده بود. شما می‌بینید اگر یک حرکتی انجام بده در تل‌آویو، فوری عکس‌العمل تو خود تل‌آویو انجام میگیره. دقیقاً همون عملیاتی که ممکن اینها با گستاخی انجام بدن مثل همین در تل‌آویو. اگر آمریکا بخواد جنایتی بکنه، حرکتی انجام بده، تو آمریکا اتفاق میفته.
You know,
they've no bones about it.
As a, my parents being survivors and Meir Jalowitz, the same situation. If there was a state of Israel during the Holocaust or before the Holocaust, and when Hitler was going about with his Mein Kampf and saying, we want to murder all the Jews, I would envision that there would be a security team from Israel or a security operation from Israel to take care of that threat once and for all. And if it was during the Holocaust, when the trains were going to Auschwitz, to bomb the rail lines and to bomb Nazi Germany, do whatever it takes. And today, when you have people like that in Iran speaking the same kind of language to annihilate the Jews, I really can't understand what's taking the defense minister so long, or the state of Israel so long, to nullify that threat once and for all. Israel has the means, the capabilities to do it. They should do it already. That's it.
You already said it, though.
Here,
they have the means, the capability, and not the will. This government, government simply doesn't have the will to do it. That's
right.
I don't think anybody's shocked by that either. I mean, we were telling people, if you vote for the coalition with Gantz and the Arabs in it, and look, I have no problem saying that either. I'm not like I'm super pro-Arab here. I literally don't think that they should be involved. If you're anti-Israel's existence, you shouldn't be in the government. That's like not rocket science.
Right.
So
right. It's
לא, שקט, יאללה, די, נו. בוא, לכו אחורה, כולכם.
אני אומר את זה בצורה הכי פשוטה. זה טמטום הכי גדול. אנחנו, כשאדם עדיין רותח, כשיהודים נרצחים כאן על ימין ועל שמאל, ומה שהבית ספר עושה, מה שמשרד החינוך עושה, וצריך גם ביקורת כאן על משרד החינוך שמאפשרים את הפרסה הזאת, זה להזמין אנשים שלדוגמה חלק מהם זרקו בקבוק תבערה על חיילי צה"ל, וברוך השם שרצחו, הרגו את... פשוט לא להאמין. לא להאמין, תראו את ההתנהלות של בית הספר. מנהל כזה עושה במערכת החינוך. טוב מאוד שאתם לא מתביישים בדעות שלכם.
אנחנו תמיד, כל הזמן יוצאים מולו.
מה עושה מנהל כזה?
Could you break that down for me? I don't speak Hebrew. What was he saying?
Tequila, go ahead.
What happened is that a school in Jerusalem hosted parents of people, also of Arabs and Jews that were that died, but the Arabs that died were actually they died as they were killed because they tried to kill Jews.
Yeah.
So, and they hosted this debate or conference or something just this week. As Jews are dying in the streets, they host a panel speaking with the parents of the Arabs that died trying to kill us. It's insane.
That is
Right.
Fuck.
And that's what's going on in some public schools in Israel.
Yeah, that's insane. That's the list.
Yeah.
There are spontaneous protests and rallies happening in Israel, supporting Israel all over the country right now.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, these are challenging times right now, but support Israel. We have to do everything we can to.
I add, if you want, Mayor, I add tomorrow morning Israel time 9 a.m. I'm going to be ascending the Temple Mount with Facebook Live and the Beyadenu for the Temple Mount Facebook page. So if anyone wants to search and watch the Facebook Live, I'll be there and you can watch us.
Send me the link, and I'm going to share it all over. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're going to be at the Temple Mount filming live.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Fabulous. 9 a.m. Israel time.
So it's midnight here, I think.
Perfect.
There's been a request.
It's going to be 2 in the morning for you. It's going to be midnight for you, right?
Yeah. I'll watch. I'll stay awake.
Wow. Well, right now it's 3 o'clock in the morning in Israel.
Yeah, I'm still jealous of you. I'm still jealous.
Listen, it's fabulous here. In spite of everything going on, it's fabulous here. And, hopefully this government's going to change for the better. That's the mood of the people on the street. That's it. Meir, what's your take on, is this government going to collapse? Is there going to be, how do you see it? Anyone going to pull out of Yamina?
No, the government's not going to collapse because both sides, both the Jewish side and the Arab side, realize that in future elections, they're both going to be relegated to the trash bin of history. So they're going to keep doing what they're doing. I just want to make a final comment because the clock ticks. I'm sort of surprised by much of what I've heard here. We all see the same news. None of us are privy to certain classified information. The fact that Israel has the capability but not the resolve to do what needs to be done isn't, well, I trust or I hope that Israel's going to do the right thing. We have an Israeli government that is part of the coalition gave 53 billion shekels, which is $16.8 billion to the Arabs in order for the Arabs to sit in a coalition government with them. That's more money than the religious parties have received from the Israeli government collectively in 73 years.
Unbelievable.
Whatever optimism you display is ill-begotten, it is misbegotten, and it portends bad things. Israel doesn't survive because we hope its leaders will do something. First of all, its leaders aren't leaders. And if there isn't an outrage as to what we see, first of all, Iran will not strike against Israel when it develops its bomb. Hezbollah will. Iran, its leaders are smarter than the Jewish leaders. They will have their proxies do it for them. And if Israel thinks that it's going to get the world's empathy when Israel decides to strike back, there are two things we need to notice. Why hasn't the Western world responded with greater force against the Russian invasion of Ukraine? There's a very simple answer. It's nuclear capable. Why hasn't the Western world struck against North Korea, which once again is launching its ballistic missiles into the sea, testing? The answer is the same. It's nuclear capable. And if we make a mistake and we miscalculate and the Iranians have a bomb, then all your optimism means nothing. It means nothing. And for us to spend time talking, if you can name the Arabs if you can actually name those Arabs that are pro-Israel, you can actually name them. There are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. There are 1.8 million Muslims in Israel. If you can name the ones that are pro-Israel, my friends, we are in trouble. And the logo that Gary wants to put on, it's POGO, 1953 and against 1970. And that is, we have met the enemy and he is us.
Let me just, because we use that so much, and to lighten things up a little, I just want the audience to be aware of who actually said that. And here it is. So actually, we have met the enemy and he is us. The person who did the cartoon was Walter Crawford Kelly, Jr., who was born in 1913, commonly known as Walt Kelly, was an animator, a cartoonist, and he began with Walt Disney. Did you know, Meir, that he did Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Dumbo as well? And at the age of 28, he transferred to be working with Dell Comics. So I'd like to thank him for his wisdom and for giving us an opportunity for everybody to take a deep breath and realize that we're all on the same side. And there he is, Walt Kelly.
So, Meir, let me ask you this question. Just popped in. Golda Meir, when she was prime minister, and Israel faced possible annihilation in the 73 war. I read it, I heard it, that she said, raise the nukes, we're ready. And at that point, the Americans decided to supply Israel with some arms. How come, it seems like Golda Meir, she sent a hit squad around the world in response to the Munich Olympics. Ben Gurion, when he was prime minister, he wasn't took care of terrorism, had curfews, did a lot of stuff that you don't see happening today at all. What's with these guys?
Well, put in perspective, the Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War was as great a victory as the 67 war which preceded it. The problem with the Yom Kippur War is when Israel detected that there was movements on the part of both the Syrians, but especially the Egyptians, it was Kissinger who sent the message to the Israeli government, to Golda Meir, and told her, do not be the first one to launch an attack, because if you want the world to be with you, you need to respond to an attack as opposed to initiate an attack. This madness was actually the play that Israel played, and 2,800 Israeli soldiers died because Golda Meir listened to Henry Kissinger. Kissinger decided not to rearm it. The Soviets rearmed the Egyptians and the Syrians, and the Americans threatened not to rearm Israel unless Israel released the Egyptian Third Army, which was captured in Africa, which was surrounded. It was only at the threat, what you said, it's the threat of an Israel nuclear that the Americans. What's the lesson here? The lesson is quite simple. If Israel thinks that it has friends in this world that are going to come to its rescue, my friends, you are delusional.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. Absolutely.
I would like to say something, though. I think that, traditionally, Meir's absolutely not wrong. And I've always said Jews need to realize that they can only really depend on themselves, especially in the case of Israel. Israel can only depend on Israel. But recently, we have seen some changes. And I will say this, whatever, you can shake your head all you want, Meir, but we have seen changes. Whether you think so or not, I don't care. I've seen actual Saudi Arabians go to Israel and talk about how I never understood why the Jews were fighting for this place so hard, and now I do. And look, does that mean he's going to go home and suddenly convince people to be pro-Israel? probably not. But you know what? We are moving in a direction where people are starting to pay attention. People are starting to
allow me
that out. And you know what? I'm not interested in listening to your doom and gloom bullshit because I don't
No,
think
no,
the
no.
sky
It
is
isn't
falling.
doom and gloom.
I'm done with that.
reason-
Okay. No, I'm going to finish my point because here's the bottom line. People are starting to smarten up. There are people that I've seen in the last 5 years who never would have said anything even remotely like a pro-Israel statement. now actually saying, you know what, like maybe Israel isn't the boogeyman that we've been taught to believe.
Jesus.
And so yeah, these things are going to change. Like, and this whole idea that, oh no, everybody hates us, so let's just make them hate us more, that's stupid.
No. I didn't say everybody hates us. I said if you expect them to come to your rescue, they won't. It's a very different thing.
And nobody disagrees with that. Literally, nobody
Two-
on this panel disagrees with that.
2 comments. First of all, it's not my call. I don't understand where you comport with what this panel ostensibly believes in. I don't get it. But I want to make 2
because it's common sense. Every single one of us has said what our opinions are, and you just always decide, I'm going to argue with something that Ryan never even said, so that I can talk for 15 minutes while saying nothing.
Okay, so let me just say this. No Arab state, not Egypt, not Jordan, none of the Abraham Accords recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. They recognize Israel as a de facto entity, not a de jure. There's a difference between the fact that Israel exists and the right to Israel exists. And with all due respect, the fact that there's a Saudi who runs around Tel Aviv or an Israeli who runs around Abu Dhabi buying a purse, the reason that the Saudis, the reason that the United Arab Emirates and the reason Bahrain is all of a sudden friendly with Israel, and this is a lesson, is because of Iran.
Yeah, you're not telling us anything we don't know.
Well, you clearly don't know it based on the.
Oh yeah, I clearly don't know. I just fucking told you I know. The problem is you think you know more than everybody else when clearly you don't.
No,
it's annoying. You're talking to us like we don't know this stuff. You went on for 15 minutes and never said anything new. You say the same thing over and over. Yes, I just said that the Saudis are starting to smarten up. They actually are on the verge of having a revolution because the royal family is not anti-Israel enough. So, yeah. And, I guess we don't know anything because nobody here knows anything but you.
With all due respect, seriously, with all due respect.
Here we go, yeah. You just talk normally. You know you don't respect me. I don't respect you either. So just be honest.
Good luck to you. You're a stupid amateur. That's what you are. And I will check that. You're
literally sounds like a 5-year-old.
You're a stupid amateur.
Dude, the Saudis more about Israel than you ever knew.
You're stupid. You're stupid. Wait. The stupid.
Meir Weinstein, chime in.
Oh, okay. Well, listen, it's already about an hour and a half, and it's like 3:30 here in Israel. So I think, we had a great discussion about what's going on in Israel and terrorism and the Temple Mount. And, right now, especially with all the terrorism going on in Israel, it's, we're extremely concerned. So I want to thank everyone for coming on and joining us. I believe we have a song that we usually.
Of course. I rarely do this, but let me go and make a quick comment. And again, not argue with anybody, but I do appreciate Ryan's optimism as well as Meir's realism. And I'm not taking sides in this, but unfortunately, history repeats itself. Back in ancient Egypt, most of the Jews said, oh, they're turning around, they're going to be our friends. Didn't happen. In the Inquisition, a bunch stayed in Spain and they were professors and they got killed. Some went to Greece. Then when the Holocaust was just starting, before the Holocaust, 1930s, when some Nazis were taking power, the good Jews in Germany said, oh, they're not going to hurt us because we're nice and they're coming around and we have department stores and banks. Well, they're wrong too. I hope that Ryan's optimism is true. But, I'm not going to sit and kind of wait on it. And again, Ryan, I do sincerely appreciate your optimism, and I do respect both of your opinions. On that note, why does everybody who's still here make a closing comment while I find the appropriate song to end with? And I did show it earlier, but I do think that it's appropriate also to show my answer or my recommendations. If anybody did get to miss this, I think this would solve the problems. So, there's my remodel once again while I look for a little song to play. I think I'll play 2 songs. We'll end with Hatikva, but before Hatikva, as Meir Weinstein and everybody else agrees, I think the answer is let's all go join Meir in Israel as soon as we can.
There you go, man.
Closing comments. Ryan, I'm going to unmute you, but behave yourself, okay?
I'm not going to take any shots at anybody. I will say this: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That seems to be the
Absolutely.
best thing you can do. And as much as I like to be optimistic, I've also been very, very open about the fact that Israel still needs to be very, very careful. And I don't think that everything Jews do is going to lead to World War III. I'm not one of those people that thinks that some guy in Judea and Samaria adding a bathroom to his house is a war crime. I just think that there are some things that we do need to be cognizant of. And I'll be blunt. Like, I think that we're in a time right now where it is extremely dangerous to be a Jew anywhere in the world, and especially in Israel. And I think that Jews in Israel are safer probably than they are in other places. But when you have Iran and you just watch the video, and that's not the only video, they come right out and say what their intentions are. And people forget they are an actual death cult. Shia 12ers believe if they can cause an apocalypse, they can end the world and it will recreate the world in an Islamic dominance, right? So people need to understand these kinds of things, because we see the world, that's common sense. You blow up the world, it's not coming back to a common sense person. But to somebody that genuinely believes if they blow up the world, it's going to come back as an Islamic super state. I mean, we have to understand that's how they think. And I apologize to Meir. I shouldn't have lost my cool like that. I apologize to both mayors, actually. I shouldn't have lost my temper like that. I'm not Will Smith. I saw the comment there. I kind of laughed.
Will Smith.
It's not, you know, I should be better than that. I do apologize. I apologize to everyone watching too. That was over the top. I'm not going to apologize too much, because I do get pretty passionate about this, because I'm going to be honest about this too. This shit matters to me. I do have a dog in the fight. I have skin in the game. I have people in Israel who are as close or closer to me than my own family. So I do take this stuff a little bit personally, maybe a little too personally. So I apologize. Anyways, that's all I got to say.
Thanks. We appreciate your comments.
Absolutely.
And
thank you, Ryan. Thank
some
you very
wisdom.
much. Eva, go
So
ahead.
I'm just gonna say, as years ago said Uri Tzvi Greenberg, well-known composer in Israel, he wrote songs. He said, "Hasholet ba'aretz, Hasholet bahar sholet ba'aretz." Who rules the Temple Mount rules the country, and that's what the story is all about.
Amen.
So, come to Israel, come to the Temple Mount. We're there. We have guys there all the time. Come, just come. You need to tovol to be halachically to enter the Temple Mount. You tovol, you take off your shoes or put on like Yom Kippur shoes you put on, and you ascend. So, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll have you more often. And we'll have some shows on Sunday where we do it at an earlier time also. So perfect. Thank you.
So, speaking of going to Israel, this is a group of young men, all of whom are not from Israel, all of whom made Aliyah and then formed an a cappella group. And the name of the song is Coming Home.
Left it all to be with you. Distant dreams have now come true. Walk the streets of legends told. We've come home. We've come home. We've come home. And we'll never stand alone. After 2,000 years, we are home. Not a native of this land, bring me up and take my hand. Sapphire seas and golden sand, a place called home. We've come home, we've come home to a land of our own. After 2,000 years, we are home. זאת ארצי מולדתי, על אדמתי צעדתי, עברי עתידי, זה ביתי. We come home, and we'll never stand alone. After 2,000 years, we are home. We come home to a land of our own. After 2,000 years, we are home. After 2,000 years, we are home.
קולות בלב בנימה,
נפש יהודי,
ומיד
ותן מזרח קדימה,
עין לציון צופיה. עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בשנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים.
שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.